Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the growing rift over Greece within the European Union. We're talking about it all from Mannheim in Germany, Clemens Fuest, a former advisor to the German finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble. He is the president of the Center for European Economic Research. Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Yves Bertoncini, director of the Jacques Delors Institute, Christian Lequen, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, and joining us from Castiglione Chiaravese, Yasha Monk, who lectures on political science at Harvard University, was telling us in part one why he has ripped up his membership card in the German SD, Social Democratic Party. Just before the break, Yves Bertoncini, we were talking about the impact it's having on Greece. There's also the impact it's all having more broadly on Europe. We heard the remarks there of ordinary Greek citizens who are angry, pointing the finger at the ECB, pointing the finger at Berlin. We have one viewer on Twitter saying Prime Finance Minister Schäuble seems intent on driving Greece out of the euro. There's a lot of acrimony.
Yeah, of course there is a lot of acrimony. I mean, it's normal, I would say, because we were very close to the catastrophe. And we'll see within 3 months or 6-month period where we will be. Now there's a new perspective. We're going to try and walk, and it will be an odyssey, let's say. Yes, there's a lot of acrimony, and I would say there will be a competition of storytelling around this crisis. Who did what? And no doubt that Mr. Schäuble will be the bad cop in any case. In any case. And probably he'll be popular for this in Germany, and even not only in Germany, including in other countries, because it's not only Greece versus Germany. It was deeper. And there were public opinions, not only in Germany, exasperated by Greece, and then not convinced that a solidarity could be displayed any longer. On the other side, what I heard from Mr. Tsipras yesterday is also a statement that there were national responsibilities. He said this very clearly yesterday. We have to listen to him. He's not a radical left leader any longer, Mr. Tsipras. He's a national leader. He has behind him a people, a parliament. And that's why the ownership, his legitimacy to implement is stronger than in January. And we must consider this, but no doubt that the key is also in Greece. They have to face the reality. And we could have a consensus on this. Mr. Tsipras could break up. He wanted to break up with European leaders. He could not. But he has to break up, and his mandate is also to break up with the Greece of the last 40 years. And in the program he's going to implement, there are reforms perfectly consistent with the need to break with the Greece of the last 40 years. That's why there is an ownership of the program, not on all aspects, of course, but on some aspect of this program.
All right, on Wednesday, the French Parliament overwhelmingly approving, for its part, the bailout plan. There, the Prime Minister promised movement on the debt relief front.
The Eurogroup considered measures that would allow Greece breathing space and to guarantee the sustainability of its debt, which today stands at 180% of its GDP. This matter was vital for the Greek authorities and was essential for the Greek Prime Minister, and he got it. The IMF has said again in the past few hours that Greece's debt must be eased, and that is what we're going to do, streamlining the debt so that its repayment time can be extended and its interest rate reduced.
Christian Lequen, this is all part of the spin over what transpired last weekend. We saw 2 days ago the French president in his traditional Bastille Day interview basically claim ownership for having saved Europe. I'm sorry, I'm being maybe a little bit too harsh, his prime minister in effect saying, well, now we're also going to tackle the issue of debt relief.
well, this is a very French old story, sauver le monde, you know, it's part of the mission civilisatrice of this country.
Civilizing mission.
Civilizing mission, exactly. So it's something which goes very much together with the French political culture. No, the risk for the French context is that France is not exactly respecting the criteria. And France is in a position now to reform the macroeconomy. There's a lot of reforms going on to well, reach the target. And I hope that this debate again, a country like Greece, you know, which well, is not exactly respecting the rules, will not have an impact on what the French society thinks about the relevance of the criteria. Here I see a risk because going too closely with Mr. Tsipras could send a bad message to the French society about respecting or not respecting the rules. Okay?
Yeah, because we flaunted them in this country for several years, that by having too big a budget deficit.
But
and the idea you're saying is that we could just keep on doing it indefinitely.
Right, because we have a firm commitment to respect the 3% target for 2017, and my wish is that we do respect it. So it's very important to have a message vis-à-vis the French population also that all the efforts we are doing have to be sustainable in the future.
But more broadly, there was an interview, I think it was a few months back, where the French economy minister told Le Figaro newspaper that what you have now is a division that's always existed between a Calvinist Northern Europe and a Catholic Southern Europe. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I think so, yes, and even in France,
different view towards money, basically.
Well, I don't know if it's so cultural, because I'm sometimes cautious with culturalist explanations of politics. But this kind of split, of course, exists, and also exists in France. And the difficulty of President Hollande is that this split precisely exists inside his own party, the Socialist Party. You know, you have people who think that it's important to respect the criteria, the target. This is probably the line of the current Prime Minister and of the Minister for Finance, Michel Sapin. But you have also people inside the Socialist Party who think, well, this is not important. What we have to do is to go back to a sort of neo-Keynesian economic policy. And I am disagreeing, it's not a secret, with this position, because I think we have to keep on the same line than the Germans, which is the line of the Eurozone, the line of the contract signed with the partners. If I may add one thing about national responsibilities, I think what we have seen in this crisis is a sort of relevance of national political culture. What is going on in Greece is not, well, the result of European austerity. It's the result of, well, decades of history in Greece, you know, with huge difficulty to reform the state, to have an administration which works, etc. And I think if the Greek society today is able to take into consideration that there is a national responsibility, then it's a good step, okay? Not staying just on the idea that we are the victims of the others, that we are the victim of Europe, the victims of outside, which sometimes goes very well with nationalism, of course.
All right, Clemens Fuest, let me get your reaction to, again, the toxic atmosphere that we've seen the last week, even after the deal that was signed in the early hours of Monday, the German bashing we've seen from the South, the tough love we've seen from the North. Is there a growing rift between North and South?
I'm afraid there is, and this rift is really due to the fact that we, follow this strategy and continue this strategy of giving more and more credit to Greece, although the country cannot recover this way, impose programs, and of course behind that there is a much deeper difference, probably not between Germany and France generally, but between the German government, the current German government, and the government of François Hollande. I think this all starts with this, as I believe, completely distorted narrative that Northern Europe has imposed its austerity on Greece. Olivier Blanchard, who is, far from being a fiscal hawk,
number 2 at the IMF,
has just explained that, markets have imposed austerity on Greece, and the Europeans have come in and helped. Without the programs, austerity would have been much harsher in Greece. Of course, you could say, the Europeans should have eased austerity more and more. And I think the fact that they don't do it has to do with the experience that if you want to give more credit, you need to have trust. And especially Alexis Tsipras has done everything in the last 6 months to destroy trust and to convince the rest of Europe, not just the Germans, that he is unwilling and unable to reform. Maybe since 3 days he has completely changed and he's a new Tsipras. I don't know. I personally don't believe it. But I think we are in a situation, and I think that's the core of the issue, where it's very difficult to make these contracts, help in exchange for commitment to reform. When trust collapses, this kind of contract is very difficult to strike.
Clemens Fuest, you mentioned just there the number 2 of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, along with the United States, and we heard him earlier, the French Prime Minister. They all say it's now time not just for a third bailout, but to tackle the problem of this unrealistic debt burden on Greece. Do you agree there should be a debt relief?
I agree that Greece cannot recover with the debt relief. Now, the trouble is that the currency union doesn't allow for debt relief. We have very clear contracts and a very clear basis for the currency union, which is that there is a no bailout clause. There are no transfers across countries, and the current program would be, the third Greek program would be a transfer for Greece, because I think we all agree Greece is insolvent. So we are talking about a transfer program, not about a credit program. And, this will be hidden through, providing debt relief in the form of maturity extensions and interest rate reductions. But if the German Bundestag goes to its people and asks, are you willing to come up with a transfer to Greece? The population in Germany will say definitely no. We entered this currency union on the promise that there wouldn't be such transfers. So we would have to first, maybe that's necessary, renegotiate the terms of the currency union and say, okay, this is becoming a transfer union. But, I think we need to discuss this very openly, and then we can do it. We can't just, pretend we are continuing with credit programs, but produce a huge transfer and then expect that this will not create issues in Germany and generally in Northern Europe, probably also in France.
Yascha Mounk, how does it make you feel, the fact that the Germans are reluctant on this?
I just think that we're leading the debate in the wrong terms. I don't mean tonight. I mean in general in Europe in the last weeks and months. I'm all for stability. I want to go back to the stability of the European Union, where we had some idea of common appreciation, some idea of a common future, and some idea of economic growth, of prosperity, of a perspective for ordinary citizens, that they might have work, that they might be well off. Right now, we're talking about a very different kind of stability. We're talking about rescuing a status quo that leads to 60% unemployment, youth unemployment in Greece, and by the way, to similar figures in Italy, where I am at the moment, to similar figures in Spain, to figures that are a little better, but not all that much better in France. And so when we're just talking about we've entered in particular terms, and this is the contract, and so we have to stick to it, I understand that. I understand that Germans don't want the money to go to Greece. And I think it's okay to have a legitimate representation of national self-interest. But what we're doing here is to moralizing the debate, where we're asking, do we owe the Greeks anything more? And then we're saying, no, we don't owe them anything more. So in that case, we have to stick to the contract, even though it's not in anybody's interest to stick to the contract. So I think we have to try and expand our horizon a little bit and find a solution about what Europe is supposed to look like in 10 years. Let me be honest, and let me be personal for a moment. I have parents who were born in Poland. I was born and grew up in Germany. I have family in Denmark and Sweden. I've lived in France and Italy and England. Europe to me is a very personal project, and I would love the idea of having a closer Europe. But at the moment, it's becoming very evident that that is not the direction in which we're going. And so if somebody like Angela Merkel got together with somebody like Wolfgang Schäuble and they decided, you know what, we have to dismantle the euro because it's making Europe toxic, and we have to find a way out of this, what's starting to look a little bit like a health machine, in order to actually recreate the bits of the European Union that we care about and that have helped to provide us with prosperity and peace in Europe for the last 50 years, then I would perhaps disagree with them, but I would at least applaud their courage and their decision. At the moment, everybody in Europe and everybody, frankly, tonight in this debate is saying, look, it's a terrible deal, but it's a deal, and it provides some kind of stability, and so we have to stick with it. But the stability we have is the stability of 60% youth unemployment in Greece. The stability we have is one where more and more countries in the EU have a feeling that they have no economic future. So yes, I understand that Germans don't want to give a wealth transfer to Greece. And yes, I understand that this is a very dangerous economic moment and we have to be careful about what we do. But we have to find a way in which the status quo does not extend for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Because what we're doing then is to create the kind of economic crisis and resulting from that, the kind of political crisis where actually not just the European project is going to be in danger, but the very core of liberal democracy is going to be in danger, as it will be in Greece in the coming years.
Egbert Anthony, listening to Yascha Mounk, there's the feeling that the wake-up call has not been heard in Brussels when it comes to reforming Europe's institutions.
Well, it's very difficult to reform EU institutions. It's the first task is to make them work. There was a Eurozone summit. Previously, there was no Eurozone summit, by the way. We have a permanent president of the Eurozone summit. Previously, there was none, and I think Donald Tusk played a key role in forging this deal. So, of course, we can reform the institution, especially at the Eurogroup level, because the Eurogroup level is not transparent. People at the Eurogroup should be controlled more by the heads of state and government, because this is about politics. And I would like to add something on this. And maybe this was also a difference between France and Germany. It's not the economy, I would say, stupid, I would add. It's also about politics and geopolitics, because there won't be any Grexit, never ever. You know what? Because Greece is part of Europe on the basis of its history, but also on its geography. So what's next step? Okay, Grexit from the euro area. Okay, so next step, Grexit from Schengen maybe. Okay, and again another step, Grexit from the EU. And what's next? Nothing next, because Greece will remain part of Europe, the continent. There is a crisis in this region, migrant crisis, terrorist infiltration, Vladimir Putin trying to extend its influence not only in Ukraine but also in Greece, instability in Turkey. And I think the French were more aware of this when they took this decision. Yes, we may pay for Greece a bit longer, but it's worth the price, because no doubt that the Grexit of any kind, Grexit from the euro area, would create chaos in Greece, chaos in Greece. And if there is a chaos in Greece, it won't be a national chaos. It will be a chaos in the Balkans, and that will have consequences, negative consequences, everywhere in Europe, including in Germany.
Christian Lequen, a brief final word on this?
Well, I will not be so pessimistic as Yves is about the possible consequences in geopolitical terms. But what was important in what Mr. Mounk said is the question of revising the contract. It's true that respecting the contract is one thing, and then asking question about is it the right contract is another thing. Okay, and here we have to be fair with the Germans, because the Germans always say that they are prepared to revise the contract. It's the others who do not want to revise the contract because they are not prepared to support the consequences of the referenda, for instance, and things like this. So Schäuble was coherent to a certain extent all the time when he said, long time ago, that he's in favor of revising the institutions of the Eurozone. But there were no real answer from the other partners. So I think the time is there where we have to ask again this question of, do we have the right contract? Does it make sense to have criteria set up in 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty? But
do we have the leaders to push forward that reform?
Exactly.
Christian Lequen, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank as well Yves Bertoncini. Also want to thank Clemens Fuest for joining us from Mannheim in Germany, and Jascha Munk from Castiglione Chiaravese in Italy. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. At the outset of our show, Jascha Munk explaining to us why he has left the SPD party. James Creedon, Germany's really at the core of the discussion this week.
That's right. A lot of editorial pieces, a lot of trends online focusing on Germany's role in what we've seen unfold this past week. François Merkel gambling away Germany's reputation over Greece. Now, that was the reaction of Jürgen Habermas, who is one of the foremost intellectuals.
Great sociologist.
Indeed, influential contemporary European intellectual. And he spoke to The Guardian today. He spoke to Le Monde 3 or 4 days ago as well about what he sees as a tragedy really for Germany as well, in terms of the reputation that it has spent 30, 40 or 50 years building post-World War II, confidence, etc. I fear that the German government, including its social democratic faction, the one that Jascha Munk was just criticising, have gambled away in one night all the political capital that a better Germany had accumulated in half a century. He went on to say that by threatening Greece with an exit from the Eurozone over the course of the negotiations, Germany has unashamedly revealed itself as Europe's chief disciplinarian. And he speaks about German hegemony in Europe. So he's a lot of criticism coming from him, François, forcing the Greek government to agree to an economically questionable, predominantly symbolic privatization. This is the 50 billion euro privatization fund that many feel just is completely unrealistic. He says that cannot be understood as anything other than an act of punishment against a left-wing government. He spoke also about the systemic governance problems in Europe. He said the Council is the only really politically, I suppose, charged body, but that is run, of course, peopled by heads of state who all have their national interests at play, and that essentially Greece is it was inevitably going to fall apart at some point.
Now, we've seen 3 different hashtags that have been trending. There's "This is a coup," I've seen. "This is not a coup." And you're saying there's one, "Boycott Germany."
Also, don't boycott Germany. So I suppose you've got all sides represented, but it is a trend that has been gathering some steam over the last number of days. Can we live without German products? Yes, we can. Boycott Germany. This is a coup. Let's boycott German products. And you even have people helpfully providing, I think, the barcodes between 401 and 440. I've also seen sort of ironic takes on that. Boycott Germany with German cars, German products, and then a sort of a horse and cart representing Greek products, which isn't very friendly either, I guess.
No,
but
I guess not.
Some people saying it's perhaps not realistic. My proposal, Germany now morally obliged to repay Nazi debt cancelled in 1953 with interest. We must boycott Germany until they do. So a lot of people bringing up the cancellation of German debt in 1953, which many say is, I suppose, another issue entirely. My new "Don't Boycott Germany" hashtag is because the Boycott Germany one only hurts the German people, who also have their own struggles. So there you go, François. A lot of buzz online about that.
And cartoonists have been weighing in again.
That's right. A lot of those themes being recycled by cartoonists for months and months now. But this is the handshake between the European Union and Greece, and the Greek government and the, I suppose, Greek people being caught in that pincer is the message in that particular cartoon doing the rounds of social media. And also the bailout. You can see again this, I suppose, damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario with Greece surrounded by sharks, and then the shark-headed hand of the bailout being extended.
All right. It's
gruesome stuff.
It is pretty grim, actually. James Creedon, I want to thank you once again. I want to thank our panel. Thank you for being with us here in Le France 24 Debate.